So that brings us to the last presentation for this morning. It's still this morning, isn't it? Yeah, 10 to 12, only just. So like I mentioned earlier, we were supposed to have a chat about some rodent trappings. For anybody here that was expecting that from Ed Dolshan, you'll hopefully be pleasantly surprised that we've got Richard Moseley from Syngenta talking about ants and controlling that species with gel formulations. It was a popular subject at one of our forums the other week, our physical forums, and yeah, we wanted Richard to, you know, get to a wider group of people and talk about ants and gel formulations. So Richard, again, thank you for popping on and doing this for us. We really appreciate it.
No problem at all. I'll share my presentation and hopefully you can see that. So okay, is that coming through loud and clear?
Perfect.
Great. So hello everybody. My name's Richard Moseley. I'm Key Account Business Development Manager at Syngenta. Absolutely delighted to be able to join you today on World Pest Day. As Nat says, I've kind of stepped off the bench for this one. I wasn't planned to be with you, and if you were waiting for a rodent presentation, then my apologies, you're not going to get one. So we're going to continue the theme of insects. That's been quite a strong theme through the day, and we'll finish with the insect theme through the day. And I suppose the second apology is that's one of the duller presentation titles that I've come up with, but it kind of says everything that we need to know about the presentation. So just to move into the presentation, and just what I wanted to do is just give you a little bit of background about ants and ant species. Not a great deal of detail, but it's always worth reminding ourselves of just how interested and complicated the ant species are to deal with, to work with, and just to take an interest in. And then, you know, think about baiting, the solutions and the options that baiting gives us, and, you know, perhaps look at some of the extra benefits we get from some of the active ingredients that really make baiting a truly great option when it comes to controlling a number of ant species. So, and I think if a picture says 1,000 words, then what we have here is typically the issue that we have for 95% of pest controllers, 95% of the time in 95% of the locations, and that's dealing with a common black ant species that are very attracted to a lot of the things that we are also very attracted to in homes, around homes, and those kind of locations. So, you know, that complicates things for homeowners. We're not necessarily talking here about ant species that have the ability to transmit disease, but they are a nuisance pest. So perhaps unlike some of the other pet insect species that we've looked at today with some of that disease potential that we've run through in the presentation before, then, you know, we really are talking about these ants that are going to come in, going to cause a problem, going to cause an issue, spoil some food, and just, you know, have a detrimental impact on the standards of the people in the homes that have to put up with these as a target species. So just to think a little bit about the ant species themselves. So they are from the family of Hymenoptera. So I suppose the interesting thing about that is if you think, well, ants are complicated and they've got nice social setups within the nest, that kind of thing, and that sounds a little bit familiar to wasps, it's because, well, they're closely related. And I suppose as professional pest controllers, we don't always necessarily get access to ant nests, but we might get a little bit more access to wasp nests, especially free hanging ones as we treat them. So, you know, I know over my past 25 years in the industry, it's been nice to open up those nests and have a look at the technical aspects of them. And the technical aspects of ant nests and ant colonies are no less complicated and no less interesting. We just perhaps don't get the access to see that technical aspect and the way that the colonies are set up and the way that the caste system runs through the colony. So they are social insects. They do form large colonies in certain circumstances, and they feed via trophallaxis. So trophallaxis is one of those really interesting aspects of ant control that make bait formulations or gel formulations very, very interesting as a control measure, because trophallaxis is that transferal of food through the colony or water or messages or communication, but it is that process of ants passing things onto ants backwards and forwards, and generally food. So that's really interesting, because if we've got a really palatable, a really interesting food substance with an active ingredient in it, then that means that we start to use the biology and the behaviours of the ant as a control measure. And I think that's always really useful as a professional pest controller. You know, if we can fit with the biology of the insect with the control measure, then it's really, really useful and it's really, really effective. So the ants themselves, very complicated system, very organized system through the nest itself. The queens, and certainly when regarding black ants, then they do mate once and they can live for a considerable amount of time. So that can be into the teens of years, and beyond that in lab scenarios, then there's been cases of queen ants surviving for 20 years plus. So they are long lived. And you know, they do create quite effective colonies and quite efficient colonies. They've raised the first brood without external food or water. So if very early in the season you find very, very small ants, then that's because they've just come straight out of the initial brood and they've not had access to external food sources, that kind of thing. And the queen completely controls the colony and the structure, much in line with the wasp species that, you know, we mentioned earlier about the dominant factor in the nest is the queen. Males are short-lived and some don't even feed. And the workers are sterile females and they do the work of the colony. So they're doing the daily requirements. So the age of the workers determines what tasks they do. So young workers care for the queen and the brood. The middle-aged workers maintain the colony, maintain the site. So whether that's the removal of waste, spreading of food, that kind of thing, but just that general maintenance work. And the older workers do the high-risk activities. So those high-risk activities are the bit where we go out and find food. So it's that foraging for food, creating those trails for food, so we know where to find it, pick it up and take it back to the nest, and then that protecting of the colony as well from whatever, whatever precious species they come into contact with, whatever, you know, whether it's another insect species, ant colony, anything along those lines. And just to be aware of the actual life cycle of ants, then ants go through a complete metamorphosis. Unlike other pest species, we don't necessarily see the evidence of that because it all happens in the nest and it's all controlled in the nest, but they're going through that full egg, larvae, pupa, adult life cycle through various stages. And then at the end of the year, as we all know, we get these nuptial flights where we get the females moving off and creating next year's nest, next year's problems, next year's treatment sites. And just to give you an indication of some of the pest species that we can deal with. Now, not a lot of these are necessarily applicable to us in the UK, but you know, I think we've mentioned a couple of times about things like tiger mosquito, those kind of species that wouldn't necessarily expect to see here several years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So it's always worth bearing in mind that, you know, there are always new species being introduced, being moved. They may even be resident here, and some of these species have had colonies here that have been controlled and managed. But so if you are working with ant species and they don't feel right, or they don't necessarily seem to be behaving as they should, then it's always worth getting some support, some advice from the trade body, from your distributor, and from the likes of me at the manufacturers. So be aware that, you know, it's always a changing framework whenever we're working with key species, with ant species and any other insect species. So don't be afraid to reach out, because there's a lot of support within the trade body, within your distributor, and within your manufacturer as well to support with this. And just considering, you know, more UK centric species that we deal with, then these are the kind of the four that you're likely to come across. Some are more likely than others. Black ants, some are, you know, 95% of the time that's what we're dealing with, and some of you may or may not come across the more tropical species that tend to be associated with indoors and the brought and introduced in various areas. Some, such as the Furrow's ant, can cause an issue from a health perspective. Some are more of a nuisance, but you know, that 95% of the time we're probably dealing with black ants, and that's really what we're going to concentrate our treatment process on, and you know, our application process and our management process as we think about, you know, application gels, where to use, what's the best product, and what are the benefits of that kind of application. So, you know, again, back to that original picture. So, you know, how do we deal with this? We're dealing with very small insects that can get through the smallest crack and crevice, that have the ability to search out with food and then, you know, leave a pheromone line so everyone else comes and finds it and feeds on it and takes it back to the nest. So, you know, these aren't simple treatments. These aren't simple pests. We need to have our wits about us. And if we can get a benefit from using a certain type of product that makes our treatments more efficient, more controlled, and gives us better access to the actual nest, the location where the ants are coming from, then we should use that opportunity and make the best of those products that are available to us. And there's several products across, across the industry that will give us those benefits when it comes to that control, that management, that treatment aspect of this particular target species, the black ant. So from a control option point of view, then generally we were either working with the gels and the baits, and those may be in stations, they may not, they may be in pre-prepared stations, they may be something that you put in aftermarket stations, or it could be that you're just putting them in the cracks and crevices that are closest to the harbourage points. But we have gels, they work very well, and they're very, very efficient. And this is what I'm going to concentrate on in the rest of this session. So the other aspect that we have would be residual insecticide treatments, which there is everything in its place and a place for everything. So a crack and crevice application of a long-lasting particulate formulation. Yes, there's a place for this. It's not I'm not going to discuss that place at this moment in time, because what I want to do is concentrate on the baits and the gels. But that's not to say that there are other treatment options. There are also dust. There are other options. But I only want to consider the baits in this particular session. But that's not to take anything away from other treatment processes. The products are there, and it's for for every individual professional pest control to assess and apply as they see fit. So as I say, what we're going to do, we're going to concentrate on the gels, on the baits. So this is the Syngenta product, and we're going to talk about the benefits and the abilities that these products give us. These gels, these attractive baits, the opportunities they give us to control technical species in quite technical locations. And we're just going to list the benefits, the drivers, what makes them interesting, what makes them suitable, and what makes them most efficient in a number of different scenarios. So I think one of the things that we can all accept with any bait formulation, whichever insect species we're dealing with, is that bait allows us the ability to be quite targeted in the way that we apply, from the location, the application, the management, the ability to remove the possibility of contact from non-target species, those kind of things. And of course, if we were going to use some kind of spray formulation, then that's not necessarily the case. It's much more difficult to be so specific with a spray formulation, where with a gel bait that's designed to appeal to certain insect species in certain locations, then we have the ability to be very, very targeted. So it's one of the key benefits of being able to use a bait formulation in these kind of situations. And they can also be very specific, and I'll give you an example of that later. So yes, they're specific because they're designed to attract the insect to the actual formulation. The formulation is designed with the insect in mind. But we can also be quite specific in the way that we use the active ingredients as well. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail shortly. They're incredibly efficient because as I've already said, what we're able to do is use the habits of the insects and get the insect to do the hard work for us. So that means that we can use relatively small amounts in a relatively controlled location, and we can get the insects, whether that's ants or whether in a similar process we're using cockroaches in a slightly different delivery of the bait formulation. But it means that it is efficient for us. It's removable, which is always really nice to bear in mind. If you put a spray formulation down, it's not coming back, it's staying down, and it's either got to go through its life cycle or we've got to do something to remove it. Where if we manage the baits in the right way, and that's whether we put it down on specific surfaces or whether we put it down in specific containers, we have the ability to take it away at the end of the treatment. And I think one of the nice and interesting things about the bait formulations is that ability to use them in and around. And for those of us who've been in the pest industry for some time, will know that from a residual spray formulation, that's an ability that we're tending to lose over the time. And if we think that probably most of the black ant nests that we deal with are probably outside and they're drilling inside for food sources, then there's a certain benefit there with it being able to take the formulation to the target species. If this was a rodent presentation, we might talk about burrow baiting and the ability and the importance of taking the formulation to where the rodents are to get the best level of control in the most efficient way. And I think we can look at this in similar terms. We have that ability to really take it to the source where we can, and that's very, very useful. And we don't necessarily have that with some of the insecticide formulations, unfortunately, at this moment in time. So from an application point of view, we can be incredibly targeted. We've said that in the way that we apply, in the way that we use, then we can take the bait to where the insects are, we can be very efficient with it, and we can purposefully and effectively avoid the non-target organisms, be they human, be they pet, whatever it is that we're working with. Not always as easy if we're using a spray formulation or a quick knockdown formulation, but with the baits, we have this ability, so we can take the bait directly to the location where the ants are accessing, be that internal. And as I said, there's that nice aspect of this particular situation when we're using a lot of the gel baits, where we can also take them externally as well. So as long as we're following the label and working in with the requirements of the label regarding that in and around application, then we've got the ability to quite effectively take the gel baits to where the ants are and make it very, very efficient, and perhaps even start to pick them up before they start to enter the building and get a real level of control before we have any contamination risks within the building. So really efficient, really effective, and you've got that in and around buildings aspect as well, which does mean that the gels are very attractive in this kind of application process. And then the other nice aspect is of this particular formulation, when we're thinking of the Advion product, is the active ingredient. And the active ingredient is very, very interesting in the way that it works within the Advion formulation. So the active ingredient is Indoxacarb. Now, this is where we start to talk about being incredibly specific from a way that the bait works and the way that the active ingredient functions. So it's oxidizing chemistry. It's the only chemical in its class that's currently available on the market in the UK. And why is this interesting? Well, it's not repellent. That's great. We don't want to push away the insects. It's also got a novel mode of action, and that's really interesting, that novel mode of action, because that novel mode of action requires bioactivation. And so that becomes incredibly interesting. It's another layer of specificity and another layer of control and management that we have by using the Advion Indoxacarb product. And that's because technically the Indoxacarb is classed as a pro-insecticide, and it only becomes a live insecticide when it enters the body of the insect, and it has to react to the enzymes within the insect's body. So from a management point of view and a control point of view, then it makes the product incredibly interesting from a risk assessment point of view, because it's, not only can we put it in containers, not only can we put it in certain locations that are away, we've got this added level of interest that's unique with this active ingredient, where the active ingredient only becomes active within the body of the insect. So effectively the insect's enzymes cleave off or cut off a part of the chemical equation when it gets inside, and the resulting molecule is the active form, the active ingredient. So we as humans, cats and dogs as pets, we don't have the required enzymes in our body to activate this product. It would take far longer. So this active ingredient would pass out of our bodies before it had the opportunity to become an active ingredient. So it's an interesting aspect of this particular active ingredient. And if you are working on sensitive sites, if you are working in schools, if you're working in hospitals, public areas, then there's another added aspect of interest and level of control with this product that might be very, very attractive. It's incredibly palatable as well. So there's a scenario there where this bioactivation makes the product of a great deal of interest in a number of different scenarios. Once it's in the insect and once it's bioactivated, then we talked about active ingredients and the way that they affect insects earlier, and it is it affects the nervous system like a lot of the others do. No known resistance in any of the insects that we're dealing with at this moment in time, and it's a sodium channel blocker. So once it's in the insect, then it's going to perform as other insects, and it will affect the cell membranes. And over a period of time, what it'll do is start to, affect the insect, and it'll block the flow of sodium into the nerve cells. And that's the point where we start to get, it stops feeding, and we ultimately get that paralysis and death of the insect, as we would expect with other active ingredients. But we get that benefit here of that quite specific choice when it comes to, will it affect an insect or will it affect a non-target species? Really, really useful aspect, and a key aspect and a unique aspect of Indoxacarb as an active ingredient. And then we mentioned the fact that the target species, well, they're doing a lot of the work for us, and with Trophallaxis, and this is what we term as horizontal transfer. It's the phenomenon by which active ingredients contained within the bait are passed from individuals within the colony, and if we can get enough of that insecticide active ingredient passed through the colony through horizontal transfer, then what we get is we get control. So we get the insects, and if we were talking about cockroaches, we'd be looking at secondary poison and secondary kill, tertiary kill. What we're looking at here is getting enough ants, taking enough of the product back to enough of the locations, enough of the the ant colonies to gain control. And again, it's a very, very efficient way of managing an infestation. And if you think about bioactivation, how that can support this kind of process, an insecticide that takes a little bit longer to function because of that bioactivation process within the body of the insect, then that allows that little bit more time for transferal back to the nest, and an even better level and a higher chance of control of the target species because of that horizontal transfer that's occurring within the pest species and within the within the organized structure of the ant colony. So as we've already said, we've got this trophallaxis that comes into place, this social sharing of food, and good baits make use of this. This is the best possible way to control ants, because we're using the not only the means of feeding but the means of communication as well. So we allow the insecticide to flow into the colony. We allow the colony to do the work for us. We just make sure that we've got the right products in the right location, the right amount, to make sure we get control and eradication. The slower if it's a slightly slower acting product, active ingredient, great. It just means that chance of control is much higher, and we get a good level of ultimate kill of the colony. We get a good level of control. So that bioactivation, that generation, that the way that the active ingredient becomes live or becomes more, becomes an actual insecticide in the body of the target species, then that allows that process, that flow back of the product to the ant species, and then we get a good level of control. What we also said is that one of our benefits of using a gel bait is you can pick it up and take it away at the end of the treatment. If it's in a pre-prepared packet like this, in a pre-prepared bait, then you can put it down and remove it. But there are also other bait stations that you can buy that will take any bait formulation, or you can even purchase the disc that you can put down and actually place the bait on top of them that allows you to lift it and take it away. So it's just another level of security that allows us to be confident that at the end of a treatment we can go and retrieve things if we want to, depending on the sensitivity of the location that we're working, depending on where we're working, who we're working with, the sites that we're concerned about. It's just another benefit, it's another bonus of using a gel formulation, and it just gives us that ability to be confident that we're not leaving anything on site at the end of a treatment, which may or may not be incredibly important to the to your target customer. And then not forgetting that in and around buildings aspect of the gel baits that we work with. Obviously, always refer to the label and check with the label, be that a residual insecticide, liquid insecticide, or a bait formulation. But we do have this flexibility, you know, that's contained in the label to be able to use in and around buildings to be able to deliver this product to, you know, to the key treatment areas where we need it. And that's something that we don't necessarily have the flexibility with some of the other products that we may use for ant control. We don't have the ability, we don't have the control, and we don't have the allowance on the label to make that an efficient and an effective way to control the target species. So just thinking about and recapping about the Advion ant gel and gel baiting in general. So Indoxacarb is the active ingredient in Syngenta's Advion ant gel, and it's Indoxacarb that allows us this bioactivation, so this unique aspect of the actual, you know, active ingredient becoming active in the body of the target insect. So quite clever, you know, quite clever chemistry there that gives us a level of security from a risk assessment and cost assessment point of view. So as a product, as with a number of gels, they are designed to control, you know, all of the key species of ants that you come into contact with. We've got this nice aspect, this nice ability to bioactivate in the insect. So, you know, even with bait stations, even with putting it in the most secure locations, even, you know, when we take every possible step that we can to make sure this is safely located, there's an additional level of security if you're using an Indoxacarb product that's worth bearing in mind as a, you know, as a just another aspect to be thinking about when we're assessing our products. You know, we use the habits, we use and we're knowledge of the way that the species behave and work, and we use that ability through Trophallaxis to use these very palatable formulations to transfer things back to the nest on our behalf. And, you know, as with all of the gel baits that are available, you know, they should be true gels, and they should be able to apply on a different number of surfaces and give you a, you know, so to make your application as applicable and as suitable as it possibly can be to the areas where your target ant species are living, moving, feeding, and require controlling. And again, things like porous surfaces, things like that, it is worth checking the labels of the products, depending on where you're doing your pest control, depending on, you know, whatever surface you're working on. Then it's always worth either reading the label, and if you're not sure, just do just a test on a certain surface, just to make sure that the product you're working with is really suitable for every surface in every location, just to avoid staining and any marks, that kind of thing. For those of you who want further information, we've developed a training scheme with Basis Prompt, if you're on the Basis Prompt scheme. So there's an in-depth training scheme there, and we're looking to develop more training schemes and make them more widely available. But this is currently available in the Prompt Classroom. So if you wanted to go and get some points, and if you're on that particular scheme, then you're welcome to go and look at that. And it just takes you into far more detail about the bioactivation, the benefits, and how it works. And that's very much it from me, to be honest, but I'm very, very happy to take any questions that you have, or any general discussions around bait formulations or general ant control. You know, very, very happy to answer any questions. And as always, if you do need any support, if you do need any guidance, then, as I always say, whenever I make a presentation, then all you have to do is reach out to myself, and you've also got the support of your distributors and your trade bodies as well, where applicable. But please, if you want any information from the manufacturer, then don't hesitate to reach out, because we're always here to support you.
Great, thanks so much, Richard. Really appreciate that. We've got 6 questions in there, so yeah, we've got a nice 9-10 minutes. So yeah, we'll get through some of those. I'll read them out if you're good with that, and then
yeah, sure.
Concentrate on the answer. So from Anonymous here, are the gel baits recommended for outside use due to drying out?
Well, they're on the label, so yes, they are suitable. As I say, check the labels of the gel baits that you use for in and around buildings. I mean, obviously, the idea is that you put them in a sensible location, but you do have the ability to use bait stations if you are concerned about drying out. Sensible location, as per the label. Make sure you use a suitable bait station if you are concerned about that. But generally, what you'd be looking to do is get them straight into the harbourage point if possible. But you just, the label will be slightly different on every one, but certainly have a good look at the label. But yeah, in and around buildings is definitely a possibility with an allowance on our particular product.
Yeah, that's it. It will tell you kind of how it should be presented or applied, and yeah, protect it from the elements, kind of.
Yeah,
common sense stuff.
yeah, it's all there on the label. There are a number of bait stations available, after sales bait stations, or a number of the formulations such as ours Outcast comes in a ready to use station format as well. So it's assess what's in front of you, do a risk assessment. If you're concerned, by all means contact us. There's a manufacturer, we'll walk you through the treatment process, and I'm sure you'd be happy to do the same as well on behalf of the BPCA members.
Absolutely. I think in this, it's worrying about bait drying out in this country at the minute. It's probably not something we need to worry about. The weather,
No.
just because.
Well, I suppose it's one of those things where it's a fair question, because if you turn up to a treatment and it was really sunny yesterday and it's not very sunny today, then you might struggle to find that trailing activity, because there's not as much activity as there was yesterday. There's not the heat in the environment, that kind of thing. So certainly from a Syngenta perspective, then if you wish, you could use the bait station instead of the direct application via the syringe. You've got the flexibility to do either or. If you're scared that you're going to miss the key trailing area, then use the bait station and give your product a little bit of protection. That's in and around buildings as well. So, but I mean, the guy, we're all professionals, so we just assess, and but just don't forget to read that label, because they do change. Even the long-standing products, they are susceptible to change, so it's worth just keeping abreast of the labels, I think.
That's it. It's got everything from the safety advice as well as exactly how to use it, where to use it, how not to do it. So yeah.
And we have got how to use guides as well as the training that we've developed. We've also got how to use videos on our app and on the website as well. So they will give, they run through application areas, where to, where not to, that kind of thing. So by all means, download the Syngenta app or go to the website, and there's more in-depth information there, as well as the the basic prompt scheme as well.
Great. Someone else has asked here, does Advion only act against ants or other insects, for example bees? I think that's more of are they a non-target issue, will they eat it, rather than can you treat them? But yeah.
Well, I mean, it will, depending on the insect, then it will work on within the enzymes of the insect's body. So for example, if you put it in a different formulation, it would work against flies and fly activity. So we've not known bees to pick up the formulation as such. So it is, when we think about the application areas, then it's down to sensible application, and we don't see any evidence of bees being attracted to it, but theoretically, if it got into the body of a bee, then it's an insect and they've got the right enzymes. So it will be apply in a sensible location, and be careful and use the bait stations, that kind of thing, if it's going to be an issue, and just do a risk assessment, cost assessment, and a sensible application, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Can gel bait work in low level ant activity?
Well, I think it can. I think the part of the problem is getting the level of transferal back to the nest. So if you bear that in mind, then something like Advion that bioactivates and takes that little bit longer, then you've got the possibility of getting enough back to the nest. But what's low level activity? Are we talking very early in the season, or when there's not much in the nest, or are we talking late in the season but cool conditions, so we're not seeing a lot of ants? So again, read the label, apply as per the label, and if you meet the application label, you've got a high level, high and low level activity on the label generally, so you can pick your application rate. And just like I say, because you've got that little bit of delay with Indoxacarb, then that you'll get a benefit out of that regarding that transferal back to the nest. It's going to take that little bit longer to work. So if the pickup isn't particularly speedy, you've still got a really good chance of getting full control of the nest species.
Yeah, Robert here mentioned in the Q&A that he's used Advion, I can't even say it, Advion twice, and both times got called back because it hadn't worked. I mean, could that be an application issue? Or, I mean, he hasn't said whether or not they just didn't feed on it or anything like that. It's quite, basic, but
difficult to know without knowing the treatment and knowing the site, that kind of thing. There's thousands of occasions when it works really, really well. But there are always occasions with every treatment process where something doesn't work quite right and we get a call back. So, you know, if he wants to reach out to us and have a discussion about the application, location, things like that, that's what we're here to support with. We know the palatability is good. We know the bait matrix is good, and that's something to bear in mind. The quality and the bait matrix, that kind of thing. So perhaps it's just under application, wrong application, or perhaps it's just one of those things where it's not been a particularly warm day, so you've not necessarily got a high level of the product going back to the nest.
Yeah.
But situations like that, that's what we're here for. No product is 100% effective, as we heard from Steve Doggett earlier when we spoke about the residual insecticides and applying, and the amount of failures that you have with that. So anytime anybody wants some support, that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of these things you need more context and detail of, okay, so how long and when and how and what do you do exactly, and so on and so forth. So yeah,
and it might well be, how long's the call back? Is it 24 hours, 48 hours? Is it 7 days? It can vary, and how long does it take to control the nest? Well, that can be very much down to the transferal of the bait going back. That can dictate the speed of control, if not necessarily the level of control. So, by all means, reach out and we can go through it in detail and work out what the situation was in that particular case.
Yeah, that's it. You possibly saw that. Yeah, the last question on there was how long can we expect treatment to take? Yeah, so again,
well, it varies. You get a good, in studies in labs, then you can see a level of control in 24 hours. You probably look at a bit longer than that out in the field. But as I say, what we're basing this on is we want that. We want that reduced time frame, that extended time frame, so we can get a good level of active and back to the nest, and the bioactivation is helping us with that process.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's all the questions, Richard. Thank you again for popping in and doing this for us. Indeed, much appreciated. And again, we are always happy to return the favour any way we can.
It was a great day and a great event to drop into, so I'm just happy to support.
Great, fabulous. Well, I'm sure I'll see you soon at some other event, Richard. Take care.
Sure you will. Bye-bye.
Thank you.